My mother laughed about my post-traumatic stress disorder in front of everyone at Christmas dinner, then looked me straight in the eye and said, "You're a burden. Get out of this house." So I did. "You're a burden, Ethan. All you brought back was PTSD and medical bills." My mother said that at Christmas dinner, in front of everyone. She didn't whisper it. She didn't pull me aside. She said it loud and clear while carving honey ham and sipping Cabernet from a crystal glass like she wasn't detonating a bomb across the dining room. Everyone froze. My father, once a strong man with a factory worker's hands, stared blankly at his plate like he'd suddenly forgotten how to speak. My little brother Cameron avoided eye contact altogether, pretending the stuffing on his fork was suddenly fascinating. Aunt Joy let out a breath, looked like she wanted to say something, then didn't. And Uncle Jamie just kept chewing bourbon in one hand, eyes flicking back and forth like a referee in a silent war. It was surreal, honestly. I hadn't been home for a holiday in nearly a decade. I thought stupidly that maybe this time would be different. That coming back with scars and paperwork from the VA meant something. That maybe someone would ask if I was okay. Instead, I was told out loud, without a flinch, that I was dead weight. Useless. And taking up space in a house I used to call mine. But here's the part no one expected. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't flip a plate or storm off like the walking trauma case they'd painted me to be. I simply put down my fork, looked straight at my mother's overly contoured face, and said in a calm voice, "Is that how it is?" And I saw it. For a split second. That flicker of something behind her eyes. Not guilt, not regret, but recognition. She realized I wasn't the boy she could control anymore. That's when everything changed. They had no idea what I was about to do next. My name is Ethan Baldwin. I'm 28. I served 3 tours, 2 in Afghanistan, 1 in Iraq. I enlisted at 19, not because I was some flag-waving hero, but because my parents were drowning in mortgage debt and my mom cried on the phone about losing the house. I told her I'd fix it. Every bonus, every deployment, I sent money home. I missed birthdays, funerals, Thanksgivings, all of it. I slept on dirt. I watched friends get blown up in convoys. I woke up in field hospitals with ringing ears and shredded nerves. I did my job. And when I finally came back with pain pills in one pocket and discharge paperwork in the other, I came back to silence. No signs, no welcome. Just, "So how long are you planning to stay on day 3? I tried not to take it personally. People change, families change. But when I started noticing the red flags, the unopened bills in my name, the missing credit alerts, the strange loan attached to my social, my gut told me something was very wrong. I pulled my credit report. There it was. A $20,000 loan opened 6 months earlier, forged signature, same address, my name. And when I asked Cameron about it, he fumbled his words. Said it was for my truck so I could make it to physical therapy. I don't own a truck. When I confronted my mom, she didn't even deny it. "We did what we had to," she said. "You weren't even here." And that was the moment I knew. I was never a son to them. I was a bank account in camouflage. But I wasn't stupid. I'd spent 10 years learning how to read people, how to adapt, how to fight with my brain when my body was down. And this was a war I could actually win. So I started documenting. Conversations, emails, credit pulls. I even recorded that Christmas dinner on a little USB mic clipped under my flannel. And when my mom said those words that I was a burden, I smiled inside. Because now I had it. The final piece. The proof that everything I'd suspected, every gut feeling I'd tried to suppress was real. They didn't love me. They used me. And I had the receipts. Before I tell you how I turned their betrayal into a fraud investigation, how I exposed every lie with legal precision, how I walked away without looking back, take a second. If you've ever felt like the black sheep in your own home, like your loyalty was weaponized, like your silence was taken as consent, drop a comment. Hit like if you've ever had to choose peace over blood, and subscribe. Because this isn't just my story. This is for anyone who gave everything and got gaslit in return. What happened next wasn't revenge. It was justice. And it started the night I left that house with nothing but a duffel bag, a USB drive, and a name I intended to take back. You'd think coming back from war would be the hard part. You'd think surviving convoy explosions and nightmares that steal your sleep would prepare you for anything. But nothing prepares you for being treated like an outsider in your own home. Like a tenant who overstayed their welcome. Like a tab someone forgot to close. Growing up in the Baldwin house in rural Iowa, everything looked normal on the outside. We had a modest 2-story with a picket fence that needed repainting every few years, a backyard where Cameron and I used to toss footballs until our fingers froze, and a kitchen where the smell of cinnamon rolls meant Grandma Lois had stopped by unannounced. But underneath that Norman Rockwell painting was a family quietly splintering under the weight of debt, disappointment, and denial. My mom, Victoria Baldwin, ran the household like a CEO under pressure. She used to be a nurse, sharp, competent, always the first to notice when someone had a fever. But after my dad got laid off from the steel plant and the bills started piling up, she switched roles. She became the family's financial manager, debt negotiator, silent accountant, and unofficial judge. She never yelled. That would have been too obvious. She specialized in quiet disapproval. Her favorite weapon was disappointment, usually delivered with a sigh, a tight smile, or a perfectly timed comparison to someone else's success. Usually Cameron's. My younger brother Cameron was the golden boy. He was always the one with the clean record, the expensive sneakers, the praise. He didn't finish college, dropped out junior year, but no one called it quitting. He's exploring options, Mom said. Then came the crypto phase. He threw thousands into random tokens, convinced he was going to be the next tech billionaire. When it crashed, Mom said he was ahead of his time. When I asked where the money came from, no one answered. And when I found out it came from a loan in my name, co-signed by Mom, it suddenly made sense. I'd been the silent investor in their dreams, without consent, without acknowledgement, just blind trust. Dad Rick Baldwin used to be the loud one. Factory man, big voice, bigger hands. I used to think he could fix anything with a wrench and a curse word. But after he lost his job when the plant shut down in 2013, he shrank. Not physically, but emotionally. He retreated into the couch and the remote. Victoria ran the house and Dad just watched. He never defended me. Not when Mom cut me off mid-sentence to praise Cam. Not when I told them about the roadside bombing that fractured my spine, and all he said was, "Tough break, kid." I think he thought staying neutral was safer. But silence is loud when it comes from someone who used to be your hero. I joined the Army at 19. Not because I was eager to prove myself, but because I didn't see another option. Mom was crying over mortgage bills. Dad was out of work. Cam was still in high school. I remember sitting on the edge of my twin bed, holding the enlistment form, thinking, maybe this'll buy us time. And it did. My sign-on bonus covered 6 months of payments. My deployment pay kept the lights on. Mom called crying, saying the bank was threatening to take the house. I wired money the next morning. She didn't say thank you. She just said good, because they're not kidding. For a long time, I believed that loyalty earned love. That sacrifice came with respect. That sending money, staying quiet, not asking questions, that it would eventually be enough. But every time I came back on leave, it was like I never left. Cam would throw parties. Mom would complain about grocery prices. Dad would nod off during movies. No one asked about the dust storms, the nights I cried in silence, the time I watched a friend bleed out over a busted radio because we couldn't get evac in time. I became a ghost. Useful, but invisible. The first real shift happened when I came home after my 3rd deployment. I'd been medically discharged. Nerve damage, chronic pain, PTSD, the whole buffet. I moved back in temporarily while waiting for my VA benefits to kick in. I figured I'd recover, figure things out, maybe even go back to school. But the welcome lasted about 48 hours. After that, I was just another mouth to feed. Another line item on a budget Mom refused to explain. She started leaving job applications on the kitchen table, dropping comments like, "Some guys your age already own homes." Cam, meanwhile, had just wrecked his 2nd used car trying to chase some altcoin pitch across the state, and somehow that was still seen as ambitious. Looking back, I see the manipulation more clearly. Victoria didn't scream. She steered, quietly, strategically. Whenever she needed money, she reminded me of the sacrifices she made while I was away, the bills she handled, the stress of managing things alone. She had this way of implying that I owed her something, like my 10 years of service were just an installment plan on her survival. And Cam. He played along. He acted clueless, always just short of apologetic. "It's not like I asked her to co-sign," he said once. "She just did it. I didn't even know it was in your name." And yet the loan went straight into his Coinbase account. I started noticing things. Subtle at first. Credit alerts, letters from banks I'd never opened accounts with. Then a call from a collections agency asking why I hadn't paid on a $3,000 furniture purchase in Ohio. I've never lived in Ohio. That's when I ordered the full credit report. It was worse than I thought. 2 loans, 3 store cards, 1 personal line of credit, all in my name. All with forged e-signatures. All tied to my childhood address. The same place where I now slept on a pull-out couch while waiting for painkillers to dull the fire in my spine. I confronted Mom in the kitchen, quietly, calmly. I asked her if she opened accounts in my name. She didn't deny it. She looked me dead in the eyes and said, "You weren't using your credit. We were drowning. You weren't here. That sentence lives rent-free in my head. I wasn't using it. Like my identity was just another drawer in the kitchen she could rummage through when things got tight. Like my absence made me fair game. It was the moment I stopped being shocked and started planning. The next morning, I began backing up everything. Emails, credit statements, phone call logs, and that little USB mic I'd clipped on for a VA therapy session. I started using it at home. Every conversation, every admission, even the Christmas dinner, when she called me a burden in front of the entire family, that too was recorded. Because I knew that what they lacked in empathy, I would make up for in proof. The Baldwin family saw me as disposable. But what they didn't realize is people who come back from war don't forget how to strategize. We adapt, we plan, we wait, and when the moment's right, we execute. Quietly, effectively, without warning. At first I told myself I could handle it. That if I just kept my head down, fixed my credit, and stayed quiet, things would eventually settle. I'd get the VA checks rolling again, start physical therapy, maybe move into my own place by spring. But peace, I've learned, is impossible when you're surrounded by people who see your silence as permission. The tension at home didn't explode overnight. It simmered. Quiet, persistent, like a gas leak you don't smell until it ignites. It showed up in eye rolls, backhanded compliments, sudden budget conversations that ended with, "Well, we wouldn't be in this mess if you'd come back with something useful." The first public embarrassment happened at the grocery store. I'd offered to pick up a few things, bread, eggs, coffee, simple. When I got to check out, my card declined. Twice. I knew I had money in that account. Not much, but enough for groceries. I paid cash and walked home. Pulled up my banking app as soon as I got to the house. The account was frozen. Turns out one of the fraudulent loans had been connected to the same routing number. I brought it up to Mom, hoping it was a mistake. She barely looked up from her iPad and said, "You should have locked down your identity years ago. That's on you." Not even a flicker of remorse. Not a, "let me help," or "I didn't realize." Just blame. As if my military service had somehow left my social security number open for public use. Then came the dinner party. A small family get-together, nothing fancy, Mom's church friends, Dad's old bowling buddies, a few of Cam's friends who reeked of weed and bad business ideas. I was sitting at the far end of the table trying to survive the conversation when one of the guests asked what I was doing now that I was back. Before I could answer, Mom chimed in, "Oh, he's between things. Mostly therapy, right, honey?" Everyone chuckled. Like my trauma was entertainment. Like missing chunks of memory and waking up drenched in sweat was a punchline. I felt my jaw clench, my knuckles tighten around the fork, but I didn't respond. Just smiled. The kind of smile you wear when you're bleeding on the inside and no one's offering a bandage. Cam, meanwhile, was thriving, or pretending to. He posted Instagram stories with rented cars and motivational quotes, kept talking about some NFT startup that was definitely going to take off this time. I heard him on the phone pitching to someone about launching a financial advice channel on TikTok. The irony made me laugh in the bitter way only veterans or people who've been stolen from understand. He once told me with a straight face, "You have to invest in yourself, bro." This from a guy who'd invested in a rug pull and used my name to do it. When I confronted him again, this time in the garage away from Mom, he played dumb at first. "Dude, I thought it was all legit. Mom handled most of it." When I pressed harder, his face changed, like a mask slipping. "You weren't here, Ethan. You bailed. We had to do what we had to do." That sentence hit harder than I expected. You bailed. As if being blown off the side of a Humvee made me a deserter. As if missing family dinners while deployed was abandonment. I realized then, what I hadn't wanted to admit, they didn't just not appreciate me, they resented me. My service, my sacrifice, my trauma, it all made them uncomfortable. Because it reminded them of what they hadn't done. It was easier to reframe me as the failure than confront their own guilt. That's why Mom never talked about the deployments. Why Dad looked away when I limped into a room. Why Cam shrugged every time the conversation veered toward morality. I wasn't their son or brother anymore. I was a mirror they didn't want to look into. Things escalated after I locked my credit. I figured it was the safest move. I called every bureau, froze every account, filed reports. But that made me paranoid, according to Mom. "Now you're making things harder," she said. "We can't refinance the car if everything's locked." I blinked. I didn't co-own any car. Turns out Cam had tried to open another auto loan under my name the week prior. Denied because I froze my files just in time. That's when I realized how far it had gone. This wasn't one desperate act. This was a pattern, a system, built around me as the unknowing guarantor. They didn't just need me. They depended on me, my silence, my absence, my credit score. And now that I was back and aware and resisting, I was a threat. The final straw wasn't dramatic. It was subtle. A conversation I overheard between Mom and Cam while passing the hallway late one night. She said, "We just need a few more months. He'll leave eventually. He always does." That sentence broke something in me. Not because it was cruel, though it was, but because it was planned. This entire time, they hadn't been fumbling through desperation. They'd been operating with strategy. Cold, calculated, manipulative. They'd counted on my loyalty, my silence, my need to belong. And when I returned, broken and searching for home, they saw it as weakness. Something to exploit, something to endure until it became inconvenient. After that night, I didn't sleep. I lay on the pull-out, staring at the ceiling, letting the weight of it all settle. I thought about the kid I used to be. Eager, trusting, convinced that being useful meant being loved. I thought about the friends I'd lost overseas, the letters I'd sent home, the money orders I'd included. Every time I got paid, I sent half home. Even when I needed new boots or a working phone. Because I believed in family. Believed that when I couldn't protect myself, they would. That belief was gone now. Replaced by something colder. Not rage, not revenge, just clarity. They didn't know I'd already backed everything up. That I had recorded conversations. That Grandma Lois, who still called me her brave boy, had saved every money order I'd sent her just in case someone ever tried to rewrite history. They didn't know I'd been quietly compiling every detail for weeks. Because when you're treated like the villain in your own family, the least you can do is make sure you're not the only one without a record. That's when the plan started forming. Not revenge, not a scream or a fight, just the truth. Carefully packaged, legally undeniable, and sharp enough to finally cut the cord that had tied me to these people for far too long. I didn't want to hurt them. I wanted freedom. But freedom sometimes requires letting the wreckage speak for itself. When you grow up believing that family is sacred, betrayal doesn't hit like a punch. It spreads like poison. It seeps into your gut and makes you question everything, even your own memory. For weeks, after that night in the hallway, after I heard my mother say I'd eventually leave because I always do, I moved like a ghost in the house. I stopped expecting apologies. I stopped hoping for clarity. But I started watching. Closely. And in that silence, I found something sharper than revenge. I found purpose. Not to burn everything down. Just to make sure that when I walked away, the lies didn't follow me. The first thing I did was organize everything. I had files on my laptop labeled neatly Loan 1, Signature Comparison Credit Report, flagged items audio, Kitchen 1217, and so on. I backed it all up onto a secure drive and then stored a duplicate in my truck glove box just in case someone got curious. Then I reached out to a buddy of mine from the Army, Noah Jensen. He was stationed with me during my second tour and now worked in cybersecurity out of Des Moines. We hadn't spoken in a while, but when I told him what happened, his response was immediate. "You need legal counsel, not just a lawyer, someone who knows identity fraud, especially veteran cases." He recommended a nonprofit that specialized in helping vets navigate financial abuse. Apparently, what happened to me wasn't rare. That made me sick and motivated. Within days, I was on the phone with a legal advocate who walked me through the next steps. First, file a police report, not just for identity theft, but also for forgery. I drove to the station the next morning with everything printed, tabbed, and highlighted. The officer who took my statement, Officer Leland, looked shocked when I showed him the forged digital signature. "She used your discharge paperwork as proof of income," he asked, flipping through the pages. I nodded and attached it to her own loan app. That's when he stopped writing and looked up. "This isn't just fraud. This is exploitation." I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. Next came the credit agencies. I filed official disputes with TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax. Each required documentation, letters of explanation, and copies of the police report. I mailed them out certified, scanned every receipt, and added it to the drive. I was building a paper fortress. Not because I was afraid, but because I needed undeniable proof. I wasn't about to let my mother or brother turn this into a misunderstanding. I knew how easily people like them weaponize vagueness. But the law doesn't care about family drama. It cares about documentation. The therapist at my VA center helped me more than I expected. I told her what was going on, how I felt like a stranger in my own bloodline. She didn't offer cliches. She said, "You don't need to earn love through suffering. That's not family. That's manipulation." That stuck with me. I started journaling again. Not the surface stuff. I wrote about the way Mom looked through me when I limped into a room, about how Cam always changed the subject when I brought up my injuries, about the Thanksgiving I spent FaceTiming them from a concrete bunker while they laughed around a table I helped keep. And I wrote about the shame, not just theirs, but mine, for staying quiet, for hoping they'd change, for confusing endurance with strength. Around this time, I got a message from Grandma Lois. "Are you okay, baby?" was all it said. I hadn't told her anything yet, but something in her voicemail tone weeks earlier had sounded off. So I called, told her everything, not in anger, just factually. She went quiet for a moment, then said I knew it. I've been keeping your money orders, you know. I have every one you sent me since basic. My throat closed. What? She said she never cashed them. Not once. Your mama said she'd take care of the bills, but something in me didn't trust it. I kept them. All of them. Stamped, dated, and sealed. I nearly dropped the phone. It wasn't just backup. It was time-stamped proof that I'd been supporting them for a decade. Even when I had less than they did. I asked her to overnight everything. She did. A full manila folder showed up at the tractor shop where I'd been picking up part-time hours. I sat in the break room with my coffee flipping through those letters. My own handwriting. Sand still stuck in one envelope. It was like opening a time capsule from the version of me that still believed they'd care. And suddenly I knew what I had to do. Not just for me, but for every veteran who'd ever been told, you're lucky we even put up with you. That weekend, I met with the nonprofit lawyer Noah had recommended. Her name was Marissa Kent, early 40s, sharp as hell, and didn't flinch when I laid out the case. Most families don't escalate this far, she said. But when they do, they always underestimate the quiet ones. She helped me draft a formal cease and desist to both my mother and Cameron, outlining the legal consequences of continued misuse of my identity. We also started building a civil suit for restitution. I didn't want to drag this through court, but I needed leverage. If they tried to spin it as a family misunderstanding, I'd bury them with receipts. Meanwhile, I kept playing the role. I ate dinner with them. I nodded through Cam's rants about market rebounds. I listened to Mom talk about refinancing the mortgage once the credit mess clears up. She had no idea I'd flagged every account tied to my name, that the financial institutions she planned to charm already had fraud alerts waiting for her next move, that Grandma Lois had recorded a voicemail where Mom admitted to intercepting mail meant for me. My plan wasn't loud. It was surgical, strategic. It didn't need drama. It needed truth applied precisely at the right moment. And that moment came sooner than I thought. It started with the envelope. Just a plain manila folder delivered to the Baldwin family kitchen one Monday afternoon, postmarked from the attorney's office downtown. Cam saw it first. I was across the room refilling my coffee when I heard the paper tear. The pause that followed was electric. Mom, he said, voice higher than usual. Victoria turned, took the folder from his hand, and began reading. At first, her face didn't move. She was good at that, at pretending things didn't faze her. But about halfway through the cease and desist letter from Marissa Kent, her expression changed. Her lips tightened. Her hands gripped the edges of the page like it might dissolve. She read every word, twice, then slowly turned toward me. You're really doing this? I nodded once. It's already done. She didn't speak. Not at first. Just walked to the dining room, sat down at the head of the table like she always did during big family talks, and waited for me to follow. Cam stayed in the kitchen, eyes darting between us like he wasn't sure if he should sit in or run. I sat opposite her. No one raised their voice. I didn't come for drama. I came for closure. She started with the usual spin. We didn't mean to hurt you, Ethan. It was desperate. We were drowning. I let her speak. I even nodded. But when she finished, I slid the USB drive across the table. This has over 8 hours of recordings, I said calmly. Phone calls, dinner conversations, you admitting to using my information, Cam confirming the crypto transfer, the voicemail to Grandma. Her hands stopped moving. Then I pulled out the printed credit report. Highlighted sections, loan amounts, dates, application IP addresses, all matching hers. This isn't a misunderstanding, I said. This is fraud. And you both signed for it. Now the only reason I haven't filed criminal charges is because I want one thing. My name back, my records cleared, and a formal agreement that you'll never touch my identity again. She looked like she'd been slapped, but I kept going. I'm not asking. I'm telling you what happens next. Because everything in this folder already submitted to the banks, already in the hands of my lawyer, already backed up to 3 separate drives and 1 cloud server. And if you try to spin this, I promise I'll make it public. Cam finally spoke up. Dude, come on, this is family. I turned to him, eyes steady. You used my name to chase digital monopoly money, then left me drowning in interest fees while you pretended to be some financial genius online. You're not family. You're liability wrapped in entitlement. He shrank into his hoodie. I didn't enjoy saying it. But it needed to be said. Victoria's voice wavered. For the first time, I saw something like fear in her eyes. Not fear of me. Fear of exposure. Of losing control. "What do you want from us?" she asked. I looked her dead in the eye. "I want peace. I want my name cleared. I want an apology not just for the money, but for treating me like a utility instead of a son. And I want you both to know that if you ever cross this line again, I won't hesitate next time. This conversation won't end with a folder. It'll end in court." The silence that followed was thick. My father walked in halfway through and stood in the doorway, unsure if he should speak. He didn't. He never did. And somehow, that was its own answer. I turned to him and said I needed you, not to fix it, just to say it wasn't okay. But you stayed quiet. He opened his mouth, then closed it. I nodded. That's what I thought. I didn't sleep that night, but I wasn't restless. I felt clean in a way I hadn't in years, like I'd finally taken the shot I kept holding back. And the next morning, Grandma Lois called. I heard she said. I told her the truth, and I gave the lawyer everything I had. Turns out, after I'd sent Marissa the money order records, Grandma also gave her a recorded call where Victoria admitted to shredding one of my VA mailers so I wouldn't see a benefit increase notice. He doesn't need to know, Mom had said in the recording. It'll just make him lazy. That clip alone was enough to send the VA's fraud unit into motion. I didn't even have to push. They picked it up themselves. The system isn't fast, but once it moves, it rolls hard. A week later, the bank froze every account tied to the loans. Cam's crypto wallet was flagged. His cash-out attempt triggered an alert. When I got the update from the bank's fraud investigator, she simply said, "They're going to wish they'd never learned your social security number." It wasn't personal for her, just business. But for me, it was poetic. 2 days after that, Cam showed up at the tractor shop. I saw his car from the window. He looked smaller than I remembered, paler. Maybe reality was starting to hit. He asked to talk. We sat in the break room again, only this time I wasn't the one holding back. "I messed up," he said. "I was scared. I thought I could fix it before you found out." I didn't respond. He kept talking. "I didn't mean to screw you over. I just thought you'd bounce back." That phrase hit me sideways. Bounce back. Like trauma was a trampoline. Like everything I'd carried was supposed to disappear once I re-entered the driveway. I shook my head. "You didn't think. You used me. That's it." He looked down. "So what happens now?" I stood. "Nothing. You fix your own mess. You grow up. And you stay out of my life." He didn't fight it, just left. That was the moment I realized something important. They only had power because I kept giving them space in my life. Once I shut the door, they had nowhere to stand. The story didn't go viral. I never blasted it on social media. But word got around. A friend of Cam's messaged me anonymously. "Dude, I had no idea. Respect for how you handled it." Apparently, Cam's image as a crypto mentor took a hit after the bank flagged his accounts. The startup he tried to launch lost funding when investors Googled his name. Victoria. She stopped attending church group. Rumor was someone there had listened to part of the voicemail Grandma leaked. I didn't ask for that. But I wasn't mad either. Sometimes truth echoes where shame hides. And me, I kept my job. Enrolled in online classes through the GI Bill cybersecurity, ironically. Started talking to other vets in my group about financial manipulation and emotional gaslighting. Turns out a lot of us had stories. We'd been trained to serve, to endure, but not to protect ourselves from the people closest to us. One guy said, "It's wild. We'd run into fire for this country, but never learned to say no to our moms." We all laughed, but there was a sadness in it too. Because betrayal doesn't always come with fists. Sometimes it signs your name while you're gone. Sometimes it calls you a burden when you've carried everything for years. And sometimes the only way to survive it is to stop proving your worth and start reclaiming your space. That's what I did. Quietly. Precisely. With no need for shouting. Just the truth. When the dust started settling, it didn't feel like peace at first. It felt like silence. Thick, foreign, like someone had finally turned off the static I'd grown used to living inside. The house was quieter. Cam wasn't around much anymore, probably laying low or maybe licking his wounds, now that his accounts were frozen and his social currency as a self-proclaimed finance guru had taken a hit. I didn't check his socials. I didn't need to. That version of him, the one that fed off image and illusion, wasn't my responsibility anymore. Victoria, Mom, barely spoke to me after the cease and desist. She wasn't angry, at least not outwardly, just deflated. She moved like someone who'd been cornered not by violence, but by undeniable truth. There's something uniquely sobering about facing the paper trail of your own betrayal. I caught her one morning rereading the legal letter Marissa drafted. Her eyes lingered on the line that said, "Intentional misuse of veteran benefits constitutes a felony offense under federal law." I didn't say anything. just passed her by on my way to the porch. No words exchanged, but she knew, and so did I. This wasn't something she could control or cover up anymore. The narrative she'd shaped for a decade that I was unreliable, unstable, broken was finally crumbling under the weight of proof. Dad Rick took longer to process. He didn't say much when it all unraveled, but one night after dinner he found me in the garage wiping down tools at the bench. "I failed you," he said quietly. I didn't look up, just let the silence hang. I stayed quiet when I should have spoken. I let her handle everything, told myself it was easier that way. I finally turned to him. He looked older than I remembered, smaller somehow, like he'd been carrying shame that finally outweighed the silence. "You didn't protect me," I said. "Not from the world, not from her." He nodded. "I know." And for the first time I saw tears in his eyes. Not dramatic, just real, raw. It didn't fix things, but it opened a door, a crack, enough for air to pass through. Maybe enough for rebuilding. Someday. But not now. A week later, a letter arrived from the bank. The disputed charges tied to the fraudulent loans had been reversed. My credit score wasn't fully restored, but the damage was officially under repair. The relief was less euphoric than expected. More like letting go of a weight I'd carried for so long, I'd forgotten what light felt like. Around that time, the VA called to confirm that an internal review of my benefits had uncovered the tampering Grandma's voicemail revealed. They were working to reinstate the full amount I'd been denied. "We appreciate your service," the officer said over the phone. And for the first time in years, I actually believed it. Grandma Lois became a regular voice again in my life. We started talking every Sunday like clockwork. She'd ask about my classes, my job, even my dog Rusty, a rescue mutt I'd picked up from the shelter the week everything came crashing down. "He needed saving," I told her. Turns out so did I. She laughed. But not the forced laugh of someone trying to fill silence. It was warm, familiar, healing. That's the thing they don't tell you about betrayal. It doesn't just steal your peace, it steals your sense of reality. And when someone gives it back to you even in pieces, it feels like being handed air after drowning. Work at the tractor shop stayed steady. Nothing glamorous, but honest. The owner, Frank, never asked about my limp or the headlines. Just made sure I had hours and left hot coffee in the break room. One afternoon, he passed me a newspaper clipping, "Veterans Identity Theft Sparks Legal Action." Apparently, the story had reached the local press after the bank filed their fraud case. My name wasn't in it, but enough was there. Frank tapped the page. "Good on you for not letting it slide." I nodded, had to choose myself this time. He grinned. "About time, soldier." Back home, things were frostier than December. Cam avoided the house entirely. Victoria stayed in her room more. The living room, once filled with forced cheer and judgmental glances, felt like an abandoned set. I'd already made arrangements to move into a studio apartment on the edge of town. Modest, but mine. A place where no one could weaponize my presence, where I didn't need permission to exist. The night before I left, I found a note slipped under my door. No envelope, just lined paper in Mom's handwriting. "I never meant to hurt you. I just didn't know how to ask for help. I thought you'd leave us again if we showed weakness. That was it. No apology, just fear disguised as confession." I folded it once, twice, then tossed it in the trash. Some people confuse regret with growth, but I'd learned the hard way. True accountability doesn't whisper at the door. It walks through. It looks you in the eye and asks what it takes to make it right. That hadn't happened, and it probably never would. But that didn't stop me from healing. I still had bad nights, dreams that sent me reaching for the sidearm I no longer carried. I still woke up some mornings with a tightness in my chest that no yoga app or VA pamphlet could ease. But I also had mornings where I sat on my new porch, coffee in hand, Rusty at my feet, and sunlight on my face. And for the first time, that was enough. Not as a destination, but as proof that I was moving forward. I started volunteering once a week at the local vet center. Not just as someone who'd been through war, but someone who'd come home to a different kind of battlefield. Emotional exploitation, financial betrayal. The quiet kind of abuse that leaves no bruises, only balance sheets. One night, a younger guy, 24, just out, asked, "How do you know when it's okay to walk away from your own blood?" I looked him in the eye and said, "When staying means bleeding for people who never learned how to bandage you." He nodded, like he'd been waiting for someone to say it out loud. That's the thing about toxic families. They teach you that silence is love and endurance is loyalty. But sometimes the most loving thing you can do for them and for yourself is leave. Not in anger, not in vengeance, but in peace. The kind you have to fight for when no one else sees the war. Looking back now, I don't think my story is rare. That's probably the part that breaks my heart the most. I've talked to vets who came home to foreclosure letters, to silent dinners, to brothers who'd emptied their accounts. I've met nurses whose parents guilt-tripped them into co-signing 5-figure loans, teachers whose siblings drained their retirement funds, and sons like me, sons who gave everything and still got called selfish when they stopped giving more. So, if you're listening to this thinking, that sounds like me, let me say this clearly. You're not broken. You're not weak. You're not the problem. You've just been stuck in a loop that was never yours to begin with. One where love had conditions, where silence was expected, where boundaries were treated like betrayal. But the truth is, your worth isn't tied to how much pain you can absorb for the people who say they love you. It's measured by how you reclaim your life once you remember that love shouldn't hurt. That's the lesson I wish someone had told me 10 years ago when I was wiring deployment bonuses home while dodging mortar fire. That you don't owe people your peace just because they share your DNA. That being loyal to your family doesn't mean abandoning yourself in the process. And that sometimes choosing yourself will cost you relationships, but it will give you back your dignity. And that's a trade worth making. I've come to understand something about betrayal. It doesn't just happen in loud moments like slamming doors or screaming matches. Sometimes it looks like quiet dismissal, like being excluded from decisions that affect your future, like your name being used behind your back to apply for a loan, like your trauma being reduced to a punchline at the dinner table. The betrayal that cuts deepest isn't the one that shocks you. It's the one you see coming but keep hoping won't arrive. Healing didn't come for me in some cinematic moment. There was no sweeping musical score, no slow-motion hug in the rain. It came in fragments, like finally sleeping through the night without waking up gasping, like walking rusty down the block and realizing I hadn't thought about the war once that day, like getting a message from a guy in my vet group that just said, "Thanks for saying what I couldn't." And yeah, it came when I looked at my own reflection and didn't flinch. Will I ever get a real apology from Cam? Probably not. Will my mother ever admit that she saw me as a walking paycheck instead of a son? Doubt it. And that's okay. Because apologies aren't the currency of healing. Accountability is. Boundaries are. And peace, the real kind. The one that's quiet and solid and doesn't come with strings. That's something you build yourself. Day by day. Choice by choice. And sometimes the most radical thing you can do is simply walk away. Not to punish, not to prove anything. Just to protect what little of yourself you still have left. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. There's power in walking away with your head held high and your story intact, even if they never understand why. If you've made it this far, maybe it's because you've been there too. Maybe your story has different characters, different stakes, but the same ache, the same hunger to be seen, to be respected, to stop being someone's emotional punching bag or financial safety net. Maybe you've questioned whether peace is worth the loneliness that sometimes comes after setting boundaries. I'll tell you now, it is. Every time. Because loneliness fades, but losing yourself, that leaves a scar that doesn't. And if you're still caught in the middle of it, if your phone rings and your stomach drops or you can't walk into your parents' house without holding your breath, know this. You're allowed to choose peace. You're allowed to outgrow dynamics that never served you. And you're allowed to stop fighting battles that were never yours. Sometimes the people who raised you taught you everything except how to value yourself. That lesson, you'll have to teach it to yourself. But once you learn it, there's no going back. Now, before I close this chapter, I want to leave you with one final thought. You can forgive without forgetting. You can grieve what you never had while still moving forward. And you can build a future that's not defined by your past, but informed by it. You don't have to be what they expected. You just have to be whole, on your own terms. And maybe, just maybe you'll find, like I did, that healing doesn't ask permission. It just shows up when you finally make space for it. So now I ask you, have you ever had to walk away from family to find yourself? Has anyone ever used your kindness like currency and left you to pay the interest? Drop your story in the comments. Tell me what strength looks like for you. And if this hit close to home, if it gave you language for something you've been carrying, share it. Someone out there might need to hear it. And if you haven't already hit that subscribe button, there's more to tell. Because stories like this don't end. They ripple. And sometimes sharing your truth becomes someone else's beginning. Until next time, choose peace every single day.